Doug Wyllie with Police Magazine here at ILETA 2022 in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm here with a very dear friend to have coffee with police experts, Kim Schlau.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me about your experience as a civilian law enforcement trainer and what it is that you help law enforcement officers understand from your perspective.
Sure. Just a little background. So I started speaking at St. Louis County Police to their academy at the request of their former chief. And he used the stories of my daughter's deaths as a training in their academy. And since I live in the area, he wanted me to come over and speak. Thinking that as the person it happened to, as the mother, having that one-on-one, that was my experience, that would have a larger effect, a more profound effect on the cadets. And so I went over and started, and then other training companies contacted me, and I started traveling with those training companies and also on my own, going to different academies and then events and conferences and things, talking about that, what happened to my daughters in an effort to lower police line of duty deaths, preventable deaths.
Yeah.
What happened with my daughters was completely preventable, and I know police officers have a job to do. They do need to drive fast. They do have equipment in their car that they need to use, but if they are on such a hot call that they have to be going that fast, then they really should concentrate on that driving and not be distracted by their phone, their MDT, and concentrate on the driving and getting where they need to be.
Yeah.
So that is what I talk about. And then I later created a program for ILETA, and it's a line of duty, or it's a death notification, how to deliver a death notification, and then also how to prepare your family for critical incident line of duty death. And I've presented that at ILETA for several years, and ILETA is very welcoming. I love coming. The first time I spoke, I had a bit of let's call it a panic attack.
Yeah.
Because telling my story, that's my story. But when I took that story and made a class from it, or an instructional class, then I had a little bit of a who am I to come here and speak to police officers. I have no law enforcement background at all. And a very good friend and mentor said, it's still your story. All you're doing is expanding on that story. Yeah. So the basis of what you're doing is still your story. You own it. You have credibility. You can do this. And he was right.
Yeah.
And so, it can be a little intimidating. Working alongside police, for the last, math is hard, 8 years, as more in the conference area, it's been very enlightening, and I love that we get that background perspective, of behind the curtain of now we see so much more that we didn't know before we started working with police officers, and I really do try to impart that to people that I know that know I work with police and question that. And I'm like, you have to understand, there's X, Y, and Z that doesn't always get covered.
Yeah. Doesn't always, almost never gets covered.
Exactly.
What are your thoughts about how you've absorbed some of the things at ILETA and other conferences? We've gone to them all, and you basically become an encyclopedia for other people.
Sure. Yes, I have learned a lot. When what happened to my kids happened, I was under an impression, assumption, if you will, that police officers were trained on firearms, driving, the two top things that they do. Yeah. I assumed that they were trained every year. They had to, and go through driving training and go through firearms training. I was wrong. And I also was under an impression that there was like one standard of training, and I was wrong. And now I know why, and I see why. But if you just take that on its face value, I can see how it could be misconstrued by someone. But once you understand why and how and what they are trained on and how they do other things, and that all kind of come together, for all of that training, then you kind of understand, yes, I understand why. I mean, I come from a paralegal, legal
Yes.
background. You have continuing legal education. You have to do these things every year. That's kind of what I thought law enforcement had to do. Like I said, I was wrong, but I understand now how they train and the additional training that they have to have. Plus, they also do a job of not just driving and shooting. They are mental health. They are, responders for all kinds of calls. And that's a lot of, pressure and a lot of additional training that they have to have, which is great because coming to ILETA, you get amazing training across the board. But I have gone into, like last year I went into a flashlight class.
Yeah.
Because again, as someone who, never really I know they need a flashlight, so they can see in the dark, but what the other things that they could do with it. And I was like, that is incredible. And then the life-saving things that they have, the tourniquets, the wraps, all that equipment and all that different stuff. It's like, dang, there's a lot going on here. And it also increases the respect that I have for those officers because they are so multifaceted in everything.
Yeah. These days, the word privilege has a lot of negative connotations. It's thrown around kind of carelessly, in my opinion. But I do feel privileged and very, very fortunate, blessed, in fact, that I and so we have this access that most people don't have. I kind of want to get out of here with just one additional question about how civilians can be better integrated into the universe of law enforcement. One of the things that I've always been a believer in, as a former explorer, Boy Scout explorer,
Mm-hmm.
is explorer programs, police athletic leagues, cadet programs, citizen police academies. I think that there's an opportunity for law enforcement, trainers especially, most especially, to look at the ways in which they're teaching their law enforcement personnel and translating that into the civilian realm. Again, those same things, police athletic league and cadets and explorers. What's your thinking on how to better bring more understanding from the law enforcement universe to the civilian world?
I think that's all. Those are all great programs. I was in a class this morning where that's being discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Is how to bridge the two, and community policing. What does that look like? It depends on the community, and are the community policing programs, are they asking the community what they want or need, or is it, the police, going out there being a face, handing out candy on a parade or, participating in Christmas things. Those are all amazing things. All good press is that is amazing stuff. There are other things I think that eventually should be done. But then you also have to have community input, and it's with anything. It's not just like, okay, a community policing, and I'm just being very broad here, but a community policing program is going to include, the Santa thing, right?
Yeah.
But you also have to remember not everyone is, Christian.
Yeah,
So
Christian, right.
It's not just that. It's like, what does this community need? What are the issues maybe in that community? That we can start addressing maybe a little before, being proactive as opposed to reactive, I suppose. But that's a whole other thing, and I think it's amazing what they do to be those faces. I spoke with a former chief in Albany, New York, and he said we had a mounted unit, and we used to take the horses out, and the kids loved the horses, and that gave them access, and they could see them. School resource officers, I think, are very, very important.
Huge.
Not just for
safety and stuff.
The safety, right? But at the younger level, letting them know, that we're here and this is what we do, and being in there and being very proactive with it. But it's one, it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
And I don't really, I think they're amazing programs. I know that there's so many more moving parts to that I may not have all the answers to. But I think any community, that kind of community input and community outreach and things. I think just even starting small and just building off of it is very important.
Yeah, and I think to your point, every interaction is an opportunity, and that's true in everything, in all manner of relationship. But every interaction between law enforcement and, for example, a young child has an SRO contact with a child in an elementary school, middle school, high school, or a law enforcement officer making contact with a DV call, and there is a young person there. There's an opportunity to have that positive effect. And so it can be as simple as just one little thing, and it can be as grandiose as something like, which requires investment in time and money and and certainly planning and what have you, of a candidate program, a cadet program, an explorer program.
Yes.
Those things require, as you said, many moving parts. But there's also the element to it that now you are enabling the person that you're talking with to have a better understanding. And maybe that would affect not just their behavior, but the behavior of the people that they come in contact with.
Sure.
So the return on investment may not be something that can be numerically quantified, but it certainly can be quantified when you see that person guided through life in a better path, a more positive path, and that sort of thing. So
yeah, and it goes back to your experiences. That was one of the things that was discussed in this session that I was in. Is, we all make assumptions based on our past experience. So whatever our experience has been in the past with law enforcement will definitely color. And it not only will color, like I'm a mom, so my words, my actions, my thoughts, my feelings, they're seen by my children. And so you want to be that good example. So if you've had a horrible experience, you may not be, very pro-police, and that will, may reflect down on, So I don't have an answer on how, that was the whole class is how do we fix this and how do we make this better and it's a discussion. I think it's going to be a constant discussion. I think that because of how everyone has a cell phone, they have cameras, things are immediately uploaded and posted, and that is a huge, I'm sure it can be a huge problem for police to try to get ahead of that, especially if it's like, in my situation, I'm glad that they really didn't have phone cameras then, because someone would have possibly got the license plate, whatever, and that's, that's a whole nother thing. But my point is that you want the best thing you can put out there. And of course, when you have time to sit and think, you're like, yes, I can do this. But when you are in the thing, in the moment, sometimes those videos and things, they get taken out of context. And there's clickbait and there's, and things like that. So when I see those and I see people commenting, on Facebook or, the social media channels about it, sometimes if I know the person well enough, I will, text them or message them on the side and say, hey, just an FYI, I see your point, but there's a lot of things on here that we're not seeing. Yeah. And I think that is one of the big things too, is the media has a very small portion of it because they only have so much time to cover it. And I really would love to see them eventually expand that or go back and revisit it. Yesterday we talked about this. Sometimes I know they can't, there's an investigation or whatever and they don't have all the details yet. But it's just like you throw that out there and then there's no follow-up. There's no, unless it's a bad thing, like if the officer, is convicted or goes, then yes, they show it. But if the officer is exonerated, do you ever see anything like that? Rarely, do you? That is something I think I'd like to see more. But again, it's time, it's how much resources do we have, and honestly, do people want to hear that? Some people, you're not, and I know that sometimes that's why I don't make comments online, because I know I'm probably not going to change that person's mind, so it's a waste of my time, and it's just going to infuriate me. So, and it could lead to bad things. So you kind of have to pick and choose, when you want to do that. But if it's someone that I'm close enough with, or someone I'm comfortable enough saying, look, there's other things at play here. Think about this, think about this, think about this. And then they're kind of like, hopefully they'd be like, oh, okay, I see that now. And maybe it will change their behavior down the road. But at the end of the day, you're only responsible for your own behavior. Right. So
Kim, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it, Doug. Thank you.
Doug Wyllie with Police Magazine will be back once again in a little while with more Coffee with Police Experts, ILEADA 2022 edition.